Video game adaptations have been hit or miss, and for the most part, misses until 2023 when Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann gave us The Last of Us, based off the iconic video game of the same name, starring Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. This show is about how after a global pandemic nearly wiped out civilization, a hardened survivor must take a 14-year-old girl to her destination, for she might be humanity's last hope. So we're going to give you our overall thoughts on the show, and if you, as a Christian, should watch it right now. Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I am your host Tim, and we exist to help Christians live in the world, not of the world, by utilizing our convictions in the movies and shows we watch. The Last of Us is rated TVMA for some intense and severe language, some intense action, and really strong violence and gore. This is a very heavy show. So we're going to go over any convictions you might have that may prevent you from watching The Last of Us, any theological themes that might be present in the show, and wrap it up with a personal review from yours truly. Without further ado, let's head into the Christian Conviction Meter. If this is your first time here, the Christian Conviction Meter is 5 convictions that may prevent you from watching a show based on your relationship with Jesus. We do not want to distract you or hinder you from your relationship with Christ. So without further ado, let's go over violence and gore, lust, profanity, substances, and intense/horror scenes. Kicking this off with violence and gore, this is a very violent show, like without a shadow of a doubt. It is violent. There's a lot of blood. This is an apocalyptic story. So there's going to be blood, there's going to be action, there's going to be violence, there's a lot of killing in multiple ways. There's lots of stabbings in the show. There's a lot of shooting that takes place in the show as well. There is a lot here, whether it's shooting to survive, shooting to get information, or stabbing to get information. There is everything in this show in terms of violence and gore, except for maybe a few things. This is a brutal show, and that is emphasized in the video game, and it's emphasized here in the show. It's a 5 out of 5 on this category. In terms of lust, our next category, there is a corpse within season 1, episode 2, where there is kind of full frontal nudity of a woman who has been infected. And so there is that. There is, however, a lot of LGBTQ plus stuff contained within the show. Explicitly in episode 3 of this first season, there's a whole plot about 2 guys coming together and having a full-fledged relationship contained within the show. And so there is that. There's a lot of kissing between the 2 of them. There is a scene where they both lie in bed together without clothes on. We don't see anything below the waist, but we do see one of the guys go down towards the waist area to do certain things that I will not mention on here. But there are those things. There is also 2 girls who do share a kiss later on in the season as well. So there is a lot of LGBTQ plus stuff contained within the story of the show. Obviously, we know what the Bible says about these things. We know that God created man and woman, and we know that God created them to be joined together in marriage. Anything outside of that is sexual immorality. So that is stuff to keep in mind. Obviously, that is what the Bible says. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5 here on this category, not because of the intense sexual nature from a biblical standpoint, but more so from obviously the mix of the nudity we do see contained within the film show, as well as, of course, the obvious nature of the LGBT stuff contained within this series. Our next category is substances, and for the most part, most of what we see for substances is mainly drinking. There is, if I remember correctly, a cigarette or 2 contained within the show, and there is the use of painkillers as well contained within the show, as well as a little bit of dealing of some drugs. We don't know explicitly what they are. Well, we do know explicitly what they are, but I can't remember the name off the top of my head. head, so I apologize for that, but it's a drug that's not meant to be used in the way the guy is intending to use it. There is no taking of drugs other than painkillers, so I do want to emphasize that. And again, like I said, most of what you're dealing with here is going to be drinking. There's some wine, there's some hard liquor as well. There is also some underage drinking that is occurring within this series. So there are these things to keep in mind, but other than that, there's no use of any hardcore drugs. There is no explicit drunkenness contained within the show as well. There is also a scene, I do want to say, where a guy mixes painkillers and wine together to take their own life, and so there is that as well. We'll get to more of that sort of stuff in the intense and horror scenes contained within the show, but that is also present. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5, mainly because of the fact that there is no explicit drug use other than painkillers. Moving on to profanity, there is a ton of profanity in the show. And shout out to the IMDB parent guide, because that's where we get a lot of our information here from. Of course, examining it through a biblical lens. But there is 224 uses of the F-bomb. That is a ton. And there's 9 episodes of the show. So there's a lot here that they do use a ton of F-bombs, but there is also a plethora of other language being used here. You have hell, you have the DA word used multiple times, you have the SH word used multiple times, the BI word, the DI word, and a bunch of other words I'm sure that I missed. Oh, and the A word is also used in here as well. There also is, of course, a few middle fingers used. There is some other obscene gestures contained within the show, so we do have to keep that in mind. But because of just the F-bomb uses, it's a 5 out of 5 on here for sure. There's a lot of language through this series, so that is something to keep in mind. Last category is going to be intense and horror scenes. This actually does lean into some horror elements contained within the show, because it's not an explicit horror game and it's not an explicit horror show, but it does have some elements that lean into some horror elements. There is obviously a thriller nature with this episode. The first 20 minutes of the show is absolutely insane and chaos that is caused from the unknown of what is happening and what is going on. So those are definitely a part of the show. Another thing to think through here is just how the infected, that's what those are called, who gain this disease, the infected, how they look. It's pretty ugly, it's pretty nasty. They're also very creepy as well. There's some that have some humanistic features. There's some that are just full on just nasty, no eyes, like full kind of fungi looking sort of stuff. It can be pretty disgusting, if I'm being honest, on this category. The other thing here is, because of the nature of it being post-apocalyptic and due to the nature and violence of this show, there's a lot of corpses contained within the series. There is a lot of death in the show. And I do want to be careful with the next few categories here. I want to just give a preface that these are contained within the show. A potential trigger warning here. There is death of young and old, and some of it is we see off screen and we see the body later. Some of it is on screen. I will say this, in a later episode, there is a death of a child that is shown on screen. There is, like I mentioned earlier, there is a suicide. There is a taking of their own life in the show with wine and painkillers. There also is the use of a gun to take their own life as well. I really want to be careful here. Last two categories. There is also a little bit of elements of cannibalism as well. And there is also a PDF file here in the show. But this character, this pedo, he goes out and tries to forcefully take advantage of one of our characters. He is unsuccessful, I will say that, but that is contained within the show. There are words he says that may trigger, and just the actions that he takes may also trigger as well. This is probably the darkest thing I have seen in any show. There is those things to keep in mind. This is another 5 out of 5 on this category. There's a lot to be worried about with this one, hence the 5 out of 5 nature. So overall, on the Christian conviction meter, it is a 24 out of 25. This is a high conviction rating. There's a lot here. And I'll be honest, like, even for me, there's parts I have to move forward in, because for the most part, there's things I like about the show, but there's also convictions I have in watching this that make me feel uncomfortable. And so for me, it looked like just fast forwarding through certain parts contained within the show. For you, that might be best case scenario. For you, it might be, hey, you know what? I don't want to deal with it. I don't even want to try. So I'm just not going to worry about watching the show. If that's the case for you, then go ahead and do that. No one is forcing you to watch the show. And none of us, whether it's here on this channel or anyone who calls himself a Christian or a follower in the way of Jesus, no one wants you to compromise your convictions just to watch something pop culture. So keep that in mind. Speaking of which, let's go over some theological themes that might be present within The Last of Us. For the most part, the show really doesn't have anything. There is a character, same character who I referenced earlier, that uses the Bible to try to be like a bridge or a piece for people. This is also the same guy who tried to take advantage of one of our characters. And he happens to be using the Bible to essentially give hope to people. I remember when I first watched this, I left that episode absolutely disgusted, because that's not what should happen. Unfortunately, there is the reality that there are many cases of that happening. In rewatching this show, I will say I think I have a much different lens on it, in the sense that I think he's just using the Bible to try to prop himself up, make himself look good, and not actually believing it. He's just using it like a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? Matthew chapter 7, verse 15. Beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep but are really vicious wolves. I think that's what's happening here. And maybe that's just my optimism and my hope that it's not like, oh, yeah, I follow Jesus, and then, this guy turns out to be what he is in the show, I hope that's the case. I hope it's not, he actually is that. I hope that's not the case. I hope it's just he's using the Bible to take advantage of these people, because he uses a lot of the phrase of, oh, well, they love me and they follow me. And no, it's not about you. You may have the greatest preacher in the world. You may be under great teaching in the church. It's not about the guy. It's about the one who took sin and death upon a cross. That is who we worship, not a pastor, not a preacher, none of that. I'm going to get off my soapbox real quick. That is about all we see theologically. There isn't anything of redemption. There really isn't anything explicitly other than the way the Bible is used here, which I believe is just not biblical whatsoever, that is contained within the show. That is stuff to be worried about. That is stuff to keep in mind. So anyways, rant over. Let's move on to a personal review. What are my thoughts on The Last of Us? This is an intense show. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to think through and process with this show. There's so much here. And I've never played the game. I never got around to playing The Last of Us. I've never owned a PlayStation, so I've had no way of playing it. But the way they transported you into this world, into this story within the first 10 minutes is just done in a very captivating way. It's done very well. The world building here is also extremely well done. You really are transported into this world. You're seeing the world around you and how things operate, and just the world building that's done through the show is just done at a really good level, especially for a video game adaptation, something that I know a lot of people might be familiar with, or if you're like me who's not familiar with it, but you still get to understand the world and what is happening, and you can connect the dots to figure out, okay, so that's how this works, or that's why this happened, and XYZ, all the other things, you start to figure out and put the pieces together, and that also is really cool to have. The story overall is also really solid. It doesn't divert too much from the game. There are a few things here that do diverge just a little bit. I think the most notable here is the Bill and Frank relationship that does take place within episode 3. We talked about that earlier in the convictions. And so there is that happens within the film. Obviously, it's not what the Bible states. It's not what we as Christians hold to. And so that may be an area of caution. Like I know for me, I had to fast forward through a majority of that episode. But other than that, it maintained a really solid story. It felt consistent. The thriller elements in this show were really solid. I felt like I was on the edge of my seat for most of my time. Even rewatching the show, even though I know what's coming, it's really cool to just have that sort of feeling of sitting on the edge of the seat, anticipating what is next. I know that may not be for everybody, but I enjoyed that part for sure. And another thing here is the casting, right? I know a lot of people, when this first came out, they were concerned about the casting of these two characters because the way they're in the game is iconic. First off, let's start off with Bella Ramsey. I'm not super familiar with her work. This is the first show I've ever seen her in. I thought she did a really fantastic job. I thought she played Ellie in a very cool way, very believable way, and overall was a solid character. And you kind of got to experience her. And what I appreciated about the show is, I mean, she's lived through just so much, but you get to see like the moments of childlike wonder throughout the show of like her going into a hotel and, there's a hotel lobby area and she's, creating a little scene in her mind. And that's the stuff I'm like, oh, that's cool. That reminds you of that sort of childlike innocence that isn't fully gone, right, from all the chaos that has occurred within this world. And then of course you have Pedro Pascal, and ever since watching The Mandalorian, I love Pedro Pascal. I think he's a fantastic actor. I have not seen him do bad in a role, and I've seen him do comedy. I've seen him do obviously fantasy and sci-fi with Star Wars, and then to see him do this role, I thought he brought just his A game here. Like, he did so well. And like, even with the actions that happened later in the season, don't want to spoil anything, obviously, I low-key agreed with his decisions because of how much or at least for me, I got invested into his character. And it was just done so well. And I give Pedro props, and I want to see more of him and just what he's been able to do. I mean, he's just a fantastic actor and someone who I think has done so well with so many roles. And there's so many others that he has lined up, especially over the next few years. And we'll get to see him later on this year with season 2 of The Last of Us. But I thought he did a fantastic job. And overall, this is a really solid show. I think it helped to give video game adaptations the next leg up. Like I said at the beginning, they've always been kind of flawed, and I think this propelled it in the right direction. This, and I believe the Mario movie came out in 23, so there is a sense of like, oh, it helped to propel the video game adaptation stuff forward. It's a really solid show. Is there a lot? Yes. Is it high on the convictions? Yes, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I give this a median score of a 9.1 out of 10. For shows in particular, I rate each episode, then I combine the score and divide it by the number of episodes, and that gives you the median score. It's a 9.1 out of 10, tied with our other highest season, which is Daredevil Season 1, as of recording. But that being said, that's all I got. So it's a 24 out of 25 on the conviction meter. It's a 9.1 out of 10 in our personal review time. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Have you seen The Last of Us? Have you not seen The Last of Us? If you have any questions about the show, feel free to drop it down in the comments below. We'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. IMDb parent guide is also down below as well. And while you're down there, consider hitting that like and subscribing to the channel, being a part of our community here on YouTube. It just helps to send us out into the algorithm, allows us to reach more Christians so they can utilize their convictions to follow Jesus better. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend time with us here. We truly appreciate it, and we will see you all very soon. But before you go, there's a few video recommendations over here that you are free to check out. We'll see you all in the next one.